In a rare show of unity, the Supreme Court unanimously struck down a federal law that allowed confiscation of firearms from those deemed unlawful users of controlled substances. The justices agreed, the government cannot strip away Second Amendment rights simply because someone has used a controlled substance in the past. This decision challenges the government's authority to disarm citizens based on personal habits that don't involve immediate danger. For decades, millions were barred from gun ownership due to past drug use. This ruling changes that. The court found the law lacked a necessary connection to public safety and was inconsistent with America's historical tradition of firearm regulation. Now, the government must prove actual, demonstrable danger before restricting gun rights. The decision impacts federal law and similar statutes in over 30 states, fundamentally altering gun ownership rules. The message is clear. Lifestyle choices alone can't cancel your constitutional rights. The law at issue, 18 U.S.C. 922 G3, made it a federal crime for anyone considered an unlawful user of controlled substances to possess a firearm. This statute was designed to keep guns out of the hands of people thought to be impaired or dangerous due to drug use, but its language was broad and open to interpretation. The law didn't require you to be high or recently convicted. Mere status as a user was enough for a felony charge. Even if you only used a controlled substance occasionally, or had a prescription for medical marijuana, you could still be targeted under this law. This ambiguity left millions, especially legal marijuana users, vulnerable to prosecution despite following state laws. Many people found themselves caught between conflicting state and federal rules, unsure of their rights or the risks they faced. The statute covered all controlled substances, not just marijuana, and didn't distinguish between responsible citizens and dangerous individuals. Even those using prescribed medications for legitimate health reasons could be swept up by the law's broad reach. People could legally use cannabis in their state, yet unknowingly commit a federal felony by owning a gun. This created a confusing and often frightening legal landscape for ordinary Americans trying to follow the rules. The law's origins reflected outdated assumptions about drug users being inherently dangerous. These ideas were shaped by decades-old fears and stereotypes rather than current scientific understanding or social realities. As public attitudes and state laws evolved, this blanket ban became increasingly controversial. Advocates argued that it unfairly punished people who were otherwise law-abiding and failed to reflect modern views on drug use and personal freedom. The conflict between state legalization and federal prohibition set the stage for Supreme Court intervention. The nation watched closely as the highest court prepared to weigh in on this complex and deeply personal issue. The ruling now forces a re-examination of what it means to be a user and who can be denied gun rights. It's a pivotal moment that could reshape the relationship between drug policy, gun ownership, and individual rights in America. The story begins in Texas, where Ali Daniel Hammani, an ordinary resident, was discovered by law enforcement in possession of a gun, along with marijuana and cocaine. The discovery was routine, but what followed was anything but ordinary. Under federal law, having both drugs and a firearm triggered severe criminal charges. Yet, Hammani wasn't accused of threatening anyone, nor was there evidence he was under the influence at the time. The district court, after reviewing the facts, dismissed the charges. The judge ruled that the law used against Hammani was unconstitutional, citing protections under the Second Amendment. The government quickly appealed, but the Fifth Circuit Court sided with Hammani. They clarified that only those who were actively impaired while possessing a gun could be lawfully disarmed. Unwilling to accept defeat, the Department of Justice urged the Supreme Court to take up the case, arguing that habitual drug users present unique risks to public safety. The government also emphasized Hammani's personal history, hoping to convince the justices that his background justified the charges. Critics, however, argued that this was a distraction, an attempt to focus on Hammani as an individual, rather than on the broader constitutional question at stake. The case, now known as United States versus Hammani, quickly became a pivotal test of the Second Amendment's reach in the modern era, drawing national attention. When the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, it signaled a willingness to address a fundamental question. Does drug use alone justify taking away someone's right to own a gun? The outcome would have sweeping consequences, potentially affecting millions of Americans from all walks of life. The stakes were high. Could the government disarm citizens for drug use, even if they weren't convicted felons or proven to be dangerous? The Supreme Court's answer would not only decide Hammani's fate, but also reshape the landscape of gun rights across the nation for years to come. The Supreme Court's review followed a major shift in Second Amendment interpretation, sparked by the 2022 Bruen decision. Bruen required gun laws to align with America's historical firearm regulations, forcing courts to look to the past for guidance. Lower courts split on whether disarming drug users fit this tradition, creating legal chaos. The Fifth Circuit found no historical precedent for disarming people simply for using intoxicants when not impaired. High-profile cases, like Hunter Biden's conviction under the same law, brought national attention and urgency. The legal landscape was rapidly changing, with state marijuana legalization clashing with federal bans. The Supreme Court stepped in to resolve the conflict and set a national standard. The justices recognized the need for clarity as millions faced uncertainty about their rights. The case was no longer abstract, it was a matter of public interest and legal necessity. The court's intervention would determine the future of gun rights for a growing segment of Americans. The government argued that habitual drug users are a public safety risk and should not have guns, likening the ban to historical restrictions on drunkards or the mentally ill. They claimed the law was a temporary preventative measure, not a punishment. Opponents countered that the law failed the history and tradition test, noting no founding-era bans on gun ownership for past drug use. They argued the law was vague, overly broad, and punished people for status, not dangerous acts. Legal marijuana users could be treated as felons for exercising their rights, creating a second class of citizens. The Supreme Court found these arguments persuasive. The justices agreed only actual dangerous conduct, not mere status as a user, can justify disarmament. This reasoning formed the basis of the unanimous decision. Before the ruling, a veteran in Colorado using legal marijuana for pain could be a federal felon for also owning a gun. Even if their cannabis use was fully compliant with state law, federal law made no exceptions, putting them at risk of prosecution simply for seeking relief and exercising their rights. Millions face this dilemma: follow state law and risk federal charges, or give up a constitutional right. For many, it was a deeply personal and stressful decision, affecting not just themselves, but their families and livelihoods. Federal Form 4473 forced buyers to admit drug use, making legal marijuana users choose between honesty and their rights. The form's language was clear: any admission of marijuana use, even if legal in your state, meant automatic denial of a firearm purchase. Cancer patients, professionals, and seniors using legal cannabis all face the same impossible choice. People from all walks of life, those managing chronic pain, anxiety, or other conditions, were caught in this legal trap. The law didn't distinguish between hard drug addicts and casual marijuana users. It treated them the same. This blanket policy ignored the reality that marijuana, especially when prescribed, is not equivalent to dangerous narcotics. Even someone with a DUI could buy a gun, but a legal cannabis user could not. This contradiction highlighted the inconsistency and unfairness in the system. This one-size-fits-all approach ignored context and responsibility. It failed to consider the difference between responsible, law-abiding citizens and those who pose real risks. The disconnect between modern reality and the law's sweeping nature made it ripe for Supreme Court review. As more states legalized cannabis, the pressure to resolve this conflict only grew. The ruling now protects responsible users from being unfairly criminalized. It recognizes that people can use legal medicine and still be trusted with their constitutional rights. Americans no longer have to choose between state legal medicine and their Second Amendment rights. This decision restores a sense of fairness and dignity to those who rely on cannabis for health. The decision brings the law in line with today's realities, ensuring that responsible citizens are no longer punished for following both their doctor's advice and the law. The Supreme Court's decision restores gun rights to tens of millions previously barred for drug use, especially marijuana. The impact goes beyond marijuana, affecting anyone labeled an unlawful user of any controlled substance. The ruling clarifies that status-based bans are unconstitutional. Restrictions must be tied to actual dangerous acts. State laws mirroring the federal ban will now face legal challenges and likely be struck down. Legislatures must rewrite gun codes to comply with the new standard. The decision resolves the conflict between federal drug policy and state legalization. Nearly 40 states with legal marijuana now have clarity. Citizens can use state legal substances without losing gun rights. The ruling creates a more uniform, less restrictive standard for gun ownership nationwide. It affirms that constitutional rights can't be revoked for lifestyle choices alone. The Second Amendment is now more closely aligned with modern American society. The Supreme Court's unanimous decision is a landmark for gun rights and civil liberties. Americans can no longer be denied firearms simply for using substances like marijuana. Restrictions must be narrowly focused on actual danger, not lifestyle or status. The ruling immediately changes the law for millions, ending the trap that forced people to choose between legal cannabis and self-defense. Future gun laws must be justified by history and real risk, not broad assumptions. The court has drawn a clear line. Only proven dangerous individuals can be disarmed. The Second Amendment is strengthened and clarified for a new era. Americans' fundamental rights are now better protected against overbroad government bans.